with you from the break. I want to follow up on my colleague from Colorado who was following up on my question. You were in here for about 10 minutes, and I tried to subpoena Pam Bondi because she hasn't appeared in front of this committee. She's the only one in the cabinet who has not appeared in the House yet. And so I was told that's out of order. Before the break, you said that she'd be coming in January at a previous hearing, and now she's coming in February, which is fine. So I printed out the calendar of February, and I just figured, like, while we're here, we could just get it on our calendar. So
February 11th.
Okay, listen. Right now, Republicans just got exposed writing a tough-on-crime bill so sloppy it could defund cops in their own deep red states. According to the clip, Jasmine Crockett spots the trap. The bill punishes places that substantially limit cash bail, while Texas and Tennessee are moving to deny bail for violent offenders. That's power meets chaos legislation, law and order that collapses into self-sabotage. And then the irony. They scream Blue Lives Matter, but the same language threatens federal BJA JAG grant money in the real world. It's a democracy-level meltdown, betrayal dressed up as truth. Wait till you hear what happens next.
She's coming the 11th.
That's my understanding.
Perfect. Excellent. The 11th. Perfect. So, by the way, since you're on a roll, should I print out the other months so we can know when Noam is coming as well? Because the Homeland Security Secretary has always come at least once in front of Judiciary a term. So she's not going to come in February. I'll print March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October.
And all you want. We'll work on getting the appropriate cabinet officials in front of the committee. We've had the director of the FBI. We will have the Attorney General in, 4 weeks. We will do our oversight like we're supposed to do our oversight.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. I didn't expect to get that answer. I was going to go a lot longer, but you saw the calendar and you just spit out the 11th.
When Mr. Neguse asked earlier, I knew it was early February. I just didn't know which day. We've been negotiating with when we can make it work. Their schedule, our schedule, when we're in hearings, when you're not shutting down the government.
Now I know the key.
Now we know it's the 11th.
Now I know the key how to get stuff out of you. I just got to whip out a calendar and all of a sudden.
Whip out a calendar, put a yellow tie on it.
Will the gentleman yield? Perhaps we could get the gentleman's commitment not to shut down the government in February.
Did those talking points go out to all of you this morning? Like, did everyone get the same talking point this morning?
No, it's just a fact.
We're back to the government shutdown? I mean, the American people and the media have moved past that. You guys are
it was your government shutdown that prevented
more garbage.
The appearance of the Attorney General before this committee.
Look, I can do it too. Why did you?
It would be nice to get your commitment not to do that again.
American people. I can do it too. Why did you take health care away from the American people? You invaded Venezuela, so we stopped talking about affordability. I mean, I can do this too, guys, all day.
Mr. Moskowitz, would you yield?
No, I'll end it in.
No, I want you to yield to me.
I'll end my moment since the chairman gave me the 11th. So.
Well, you can yield to the. It's your time.
Sure,
you can yield if you want.
I will yield to Ms. Crockett.
Okay, thank you so much. There's a lot of conversation about shutdown, and I'm curious to know if you can answer just a couple of questions for me. Who currently controls the Senate? Who currently controls the Senate? Answer the question.
The Republican.
Thank you. Who currently controls the House?
The Republican.
So if there is...
Is this the same test that the president gets when he does the...
I think it is. Okay. I think it is. The ones that he claims that he actually passes. But nevertheless, so if the government shuts down again, would it be on the Democrats or the Republicans?
The people in charge, the Republicans.
Okay. I just thought that my math wasn't mathing. And then the last thing that I have for you, actually, Mr. Chairman, is there any reason that we can't get the Attorney General to come in before your January 31 deadline? Because it almost sounds like y'all are projecting that y'all are about to shut the government down, and then you will go ahead and use the excuse that we were shut down and so she couldn't get in.
We're scheduled for the 11th. She'll be here the 11th.
Oh, okay. I'll yield.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for an amendment.
Let's go to Ms. McBath first.
We have one more speaker on the bill. Okay, I think the gentlelady from Georgia, and then we'll come back to the gentlelady from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to actually talk about the bill. Okay, so this bill would actually defund the police, eliminate essential public safety resources from local communities, and actually punish crime victims for policy decisions over which they have no control. It is cynical, misguided, and it's wrong. Republican fear-mongering about bail is just one thing, but it's another to play partisan games with law enforcement, crime victims, and our safety. This administration has already eliminated and canceled hundreds of millions of dollars that support vital public safety functions and essential services for crime victims. But this bill goes further, weaponizing our nation's cornerstone crime-fighting program, the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program, also known as BJA JAG. Law enforcement agencies across the country rely on BJA JAG funds to fight crime. The funding reaches every state and supports every congressional district, red, blue, urban, suburban, and rural, and now that that is actually how it should be. Public safety is not partisan, as it has become here in this committee. In Georgia,
I printed out the calendar of February. That's the line that tells you everything about where Congress is right now. Because in this hearing, a member literally has to wave a calendar around to get a straight answer out of the chairman about when a cabinet official will show up. P. And in the very same session, Republicans push a law and order bill so sloppily written that, based on how it's described in this transcript, it risks kneecapping police funding in their own deep red states. Here's the gavel line. This isn't governing, it's cosplay with consequences. And I'm going to translate what this means in plain English, using only what were actually shown in this clip, what's said in the room, what's claimed by the narrator, and what's still fuzzy. So let's set the scene. The transcript frames Republicans as introducing something called the Keep Violent Criminals Off Streets Act, described here as a bill meant to punish jurisdictions that pursue bail reform by stripping federal grants. The hook in the clip is simple. Republicans want to hit blue states, but the language is so blunt that it could boomerang into states like Texas and Tennessee, places where Republicans themselves are pushing changes that, depending on how you define the terms, could count as limiting cash bail. Now pause. That's the story as presented here. We're not shown the bill text on screen. We're not given a clean legal definition in the clip beyond the phrase, substantially limit cash bail. So everything we say about the bill's exact mechanics has to be anchored to what's in this transcript, especially when the narrator later says they looked into specific provisions. But even with those guardrails, the exchange in the hearing is brutally revealing about priorities. First, you've got Jared Moskowitz coming in hot with oversight, trying to subpoena Pam Bondi, saying she's the only cabinet member who hasn't appeared before the committee yet, and getting told it's out of order. He says the chairman previously claimed she'd come in January. Now it's February. Fine. So he literally prints February out and says, basically, let's pick a day right now. And the chairman's answer is immediate, February 11th. That's the moment. The prop works. The date appears like magic. And Moskowitz even jokes that he didn't expect to get that answer and was ready to go longer, but the calendar pulled it out of him. Okay, that's funny. It's also dark. Because what does it tell you? It tells you that the bottleneck isn't always logistics. Sometimes it's leverage. Sometimes it's the willingness to be pinned down in public. And a simple piece of paper suddenly turns vague, we'll get to it talk into an actual commitment, at least as spoken in the room. Then the conversation immediately slides into the shutdown talking points. You can hear the rhythm of it. Someone tries to get a commitment not to shut down the government. Someone else says everybody got the same talking points. Then it turns into that familiar ping pong where nobody wants to own the risk. And then Representative Crockett steps in and does something that is simultaneously basic and devastating. She forces the math. She asks who controls the Senate. The answer in the transcript, Republicans. Who controls the House? Republicans. So if the government shuts down, who wears it? The people in charge, Republicans. That's not a partisan gotcha. That's a chain of command question. That's accountability in its simplest form. You can hear the frustration in the room because it cuts through the fog machine. And Crockett adds another pointed question. Is there any reason the Attorney General can't come in before a January 31st deadline? Because it almost sounds like they're projecting a shutdown and could later use the shutdown as an excuse for why she couldn't appear. Now, I'm not going to pretend the timeline is perfectly clean here, because even in the transcript, the dates are tossed around in a conversational way. January, February, 4 weeks, the 11th, January 31st. What's clear is the dynamic, delay, deflection, then a calendar forcing specificity. And that dynamic matters because it's the same DNA you see when the committee shifts to the bill. Here comes Representative Lucy McBath, identified in the transcript as gentle lady from Georgia. And she does what lawmakers are supposed to do. She talks about the bill. She says flat out, this bill would defund the police, eliminate public safety resources, and punish crime victims for policy decisions they don't control. And she calls it cynical and misguided, accusing Republicans of fear-mongering about bail while playing partisan games with safety, victims, and law enforcement. Then she anchors the policy to a real mechanism discussed in the transcript, the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program, spelled in the transcript as BJA JAG or Burn JAG. And she explains what those grants do. Not vibes, functions. They fund support for victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, child abuse. They help combat elder abuse and human trafficking. They support sexual assault response teams. They fund forensic tools. They pay for data analysis so states can make evidence-driven policy decisions. They support training that raises statewide standards. In other words, this isn't a culture war trophy, it's plumbing. It's the stuff that makes a justice system function when the cameras aren't there. And then she makes the key institutional point. For almost 40 years, Burn JAG hasn't had a partisan loyalty test. It reaches every state and every congressional district, red and blue, urban and rural. She's basically saying, public safety funding was built to be boring on purpose, because boring is how you keep services stable. And now, in her telling, the bill weaponizes that stable funding stream to enforce a partisan agenda not based on fact and not based on truth. That's the first act. Oversight turned into a calendar stunt, shutdown talk used as noise, and then a law and order bill that, according to the speakers, would gut the very programs that keep communities safe. Now the second act starts when Jasmine Crockett takes the mic, because she doesn't just argue politics, she argues law. She says she's represented over 1,000 people in court in criminal defense matters, and she tells the room, basically, that they don't understand what they put into writing. She warns against knee-jerk drafting and pushes for thoughtfulness in legislation. Then she brings up Texas and Tennessee pursuing constitutional amendments to allow judges to deny bail for more violent crimes, moving beyond current limits.
Burn JAG grants provide direct financial support to innocent victims of violent crime, including victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, and child abuse. These grants help combat elder abuse and human trafficking. They support sexual assault response teams and put the latest forensic tools in the hands of law enforcement and first responders. They fund data analysis that helps Georgia make smart, evidence-driven policy decisions around public safety, criminal justice, and victim services issues. And they support training that raises standards statewide. That is just the tip of the iceberg. I could go on and on about the many uses of Burn JAG funding in Georgia, which is, my district, or any other state or district in this country. Public safety matters to all Americans, and there has never been a partisan litmus test for Burn JAG support. That's how it's supposed to work, and that's how it has worked for almost 40 years. It's a model for how the federal government can support state and local communities. But this bill would disqualify jurisdictions from receiving Burn JAG funding if they don't fall in line with Trump's partisan agenda that is not based on fact and it's not based on truth. This bill would penalize states that have modeled their pretrial detention systems based on our federal courts, which boast an arrest rate of less than 2% for individuals arrested for a new offense while on federal pretrial supervision. It would even disqualify jurisdictions where the most violent offenders are not eligible for bail, like in federal court where dangerous offenders charged with violent crimes are preemptively detained. How does any of this make sense? The American people deserve to be safe in their communities. They don't need more partisan hype. We've heard enough of the partisan hype here today already. We should be working together to support states and localities to reduce crime and hold dangerous offenders accountable. I urge my colleagues to join me in opposing H.R. 5213. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady from Texas, recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. So as many of you know, I not only represent Texas, but I have obviously represented well over 1,000 people in court as it relates to criminal defense cases. And so this is something that I know a little bit about, and I don't know if y'all truly understand what it is that you put into writing, which is why we shouldn't just do knee-jerk things, and we should be very thoughtful as we are crafting legislation. So some of you may or may not know that both Texas and Tennessee are pursuing constitutional amendments to allow judges to deny bail for more violent crimes, moving beyond current limits where bail can often only be denied for capital offenses, kind of like what that ICE officer committed, because usually when you execute somebody that way, you could be charged with a capital offense. And so in a state like Texas, it is already a situation where that kind of officer should be soon to be defendant would actually then...
The point she's building toward is that the bill's language could collide with what those states are doing. And here's where she gives the civics lesson that too many people pretend is partisan, the presumption of innocence. She says we don't hold people without bail because we have this little nasty thing called the Constitution. In her framing, bail isn't supposed to be punishment. Punishment comes after. Bail is about ensuring someone returns to court. She describes what judges weigh: history of fleeing, criminal history, seriousness of charges, credibility assessments, threat to the community. Her point is that these are individualized decisions, and Congress shouldn't strip tools from the judiciary with one-size-fits-all language. Then she zeroes in on the phrase that becomes the trap door: substantially limit cash bail. She asks what that even means, and she argues that if Texas and Tennessee are moving to deny bail in more cases, limiting who can get cash bail, then, depending on interpretation, the states themselves could get hit by the bill's penalty. That's her caught you in your own words moment. Not because she's doing magic, because she's reading the language like a lawyer instead of treating it like a slogan. Now, right after Crockett yields, the transcript shifts into a narrator voice that goes beyond the hearing. The narrator says, "If you're watching and thinking, wait, did they really write a bill that hurts their own states? Yes." And the narrator claims they looked into the text of H.R. 5213 and specific state laws Crockett referenced. This is a critical boundary line for us. In this clip, the narrator is asserting outside research. We aren't shown primary documents in the transcript. So we can discuss what the narrator says, because it's in the transcript, but we can't present it as independently verified. With that said, listen to the mechanism as presented. The narrator says the Republican bill penalizes states that substantially limit cash bail. The narrator then references the Texas Tribune and says Texas voters recently approved Proposition 4, described here as a constitutional amendment allowing judges to deny bail entirely for certain violent offenses. Then comes the punch. If you deny bail, you're limiting cash bail to zero. You remove the option to pay, and therefore, the narrator argues, Texas's tougher stance could trigger a federal penalty under the GOP bill. Whether that legal interpretation is correct is not something we can certify from this transcript alone, but we can evaluate what it reveals about drafting incentives, because even the risk of that kind of boomerang is a flashing red warning light. It's what happens when legislation is written like a press release. You stop thinking in definitions and start thinking in applause lines. And definitions don't care about applause. Then the narrator brings the funding point back with more claimed sourcing. They say they check data from the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and they cite the National Criminal Justice Association. They assert BJA JAG is a primary provider of federal criminal justice funding, and they claim that in 2024, Texas received over $14 million in BJA JAG funding. Again, that number, those attributions, those specifics, those are presented by the narrator inside this transcript, not demonstrated with documents in the clip we have. So the safe way to handle it is to treat it as the clip's allegation, the narrator says. But the story doesn't rely on the exact dollar figure to land. The core point is simpler and fully supported by what's in the hearing. This bill is tied to federal grants that support law enforcement and victims. If you weaponize those grants as punishment, you're putting local safety infrastructure on the bargaining table. And that's why this moment matters beyond political theater, because bail reform isn't a catchphrase in real life. It's the difference between a person showing up to work and being held pre-trial because they can't afford money bail for a low-level charge. It's the difference between a dangerous person being detained because a judge has the tools to do it versus a system that treats cash as the gatekeeper. Crockett is telling you, bail is supposed to be about ensuring return to court and assessing risk, not handing out punishment early. McBath is telling you, the grants being targeted fund the mundane, life-saving stuff: training, forensic capacity, victim support, trafficking investigations. So when a committee treats this like a game of own the other side, it's not just messy politics, it's institutional negligence. And you can see the persuasion tactics right in the transcript structure. There's narrative flooding. Shutdown talk pops up midstream and instantly hijacks the air in the room. There's performative certainty. The chairman can say, "We'll do oversight," while giving no details until a calendar forces an answer. There's slogan-first framing. Law and order becomes a brand identity, even as lawmakers argue that the bill undercuts law enforcement resources. And there's the telltale obsession with the clip moment. The narrator even says the strategy is about a 30-second clip where they get to claim they voted to stop bail reform, regardless of whether the policy actually works. Now, take a step back and look at the pattern this transcript paints. You've got a majority that, in this clip, is described as controlling the House and Senate, and the White House is referenced in broader commentary as well. Yet the conversation is still stuck in grievance mode, shutdown chatter, and punitive bill writing designed for partisan punishment rather than functional governance. And even if you strip away every narrator flourish, the hearing itself shows lawmakers arguing that a bill aimed at public safety would punish crime victims and threaten resources used by law enforcement. That's not policy disagreement territory. That's why is the bill written this way territory. Here's where it hits the public, not just the committee room. If your city uses federal grant money for forensic backlog work, rape kits, lab upgrades, training, these decisions aren't abstract. If your county relies on task forces for trafficking cases or domestic violence response capacity, this isn't cable news entertainment.
Go in before a judge, that judge would arraign him, and then that judge would make an assessment, and just because you're charged with capital murder doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be denied bail, but that is such a serious offense and serious accusation that constitutionally it is one that has been historically justified as a means to hold someone without bail. And the reason that we don't hold people without bail is because we have this little nasty thing called the Constitution. And in that Constitution, it says that there is a presumption of innocence. And sometimes what happens is people are innocent. I mean, we know that y'all may not have y'all's current president. If he was incarcerated for his crimes and never got bail, he may have just been sitting there for a long time. But we know that he didn't even have to really go and spend any time in jail when he got arrested for crimes in 4 different jurisdictions, both state and federal. But nevertheless, so what we do is to make sure that a defendant is cloaked within that, we have a balancing act, because everything about the Constitution is about balance. And so if somebody has a long history where they have gone out, committed violent offenses over and over and over, then a judge has that information in front of them. And mind you, the best person to decide what you will do as it relates to bail is a judge, because the judge is able to judge every single situation and determine whether or not someone is going to be a threat to the community, because that's what it's actually supposed to be about. Bail is not supposed to be punishment. Punishment is supposed to come after the fact. Bail is supposed to be to assure that someone actually shows back up. So if they have a history of fleeing, that is something that a judge takes into consideration. If they have a long criminal history, that's something they take into consideration. If they are facing a significant amount of time, which is why when someone is accused of a capital offense, such as this ICE officer who should be facing significant crimes, then they look at the fact that maybe like in a state like Texas, if you are facing a capital offense, you are facing death or life without possibility of parole. And so when you are balancing this, you have the ability to judge the credibility of the witnesses that are going to come before you and testify about why that person may or may not be a threat to the community. You have the ability to make these assessments. For us to take away tools does not make sense, because we don't know every individual situation. You are taking power away from the judiciary. And so I think that that's also problematic. But let me continue on. The reason that I say that I don't think that y'all thought this out very well is because what is the meaning of substantially limits cash bail? Because when Texas and Tennessee decided to go in, they decided to limit how many people could actually get cash bail. They have decided that they want to deny even more people cash bail. So you may end up cutting off funds to Texas as well as Tennessee because they literally are in the process of changing the Constitution to actually limit how many people qualify. So you may want to go back and read your language, or it's okay if Texas doesn't get the money because, you know, we got a surplus. So anyway, I will yield my time.
If your local department uses those funds for equipment or cross-jurisdiction coordination, then turning the funding stream into a political cudgel creates instability where stability is the entire point. And notice what's so corrosive about it. It forces local safety into partisan compliance. McBath's description is basically, BJA JAG was designed to support communities without asking them to pass an ideological loyalty test. This bill, as described, flips that and makes grant eligibility contingent on falling in line with a national political agenda. That's not conservative or liberal in principle. That's centralization through punishment. That's using money meant for crime fighting and victim services as leverage in a culture war. Now add Crockett's constitutional argument back into it. The presumption of innocence is not a soft on crime slogan. It's the guardrail that prevents a system from jailing people indefinitely before they're convicted. Crockett is saying, bail decisions are a balance. They're individualized. Judges consider risk, flight, history, seriousness. Bail isn't supposed to be a penalty up front. So if a federal bill treats limiting cash bail as automatically suspect, without careful legal definitions and carve-outs, you can end up punishing systems that are actually trying to manage violent risk cases in a constitutionally coherent way. That's the broader civic danger. When lawmakers write criminal justice policy like it's a meme, you get outcomes that collide with constitutional design, strain local resources, and invite litigation. The country pays for that. Courts pay for that. Communities pay for that. And that brings us to the line crossed moment in this clip. It's not just that the bill might boomerang. Again, that's asserted by Crockett and reinforced by the narrator's account. It's that the incentives are upside down. A legislature is supposed to draft precise language to achieve a real outcome, then fund the systems needed to execute it. What this transcript shows is a version of Congress where drafting becomes a weapon and governance becomes content. Oversight becomes a calendar skit. Budget stability becomes a shutdown talking point. Public safety funding becomes a threat. Constitutional principles become props in a cable news fight. Short sentences now, because this is the core. That's not tough on crime. That's reckless. That's a contempt for competence. And you can hear it in how Crockett speaks. She's not just mad at the politics. She's irritated at the sloppiness, at the fact that people are writing about bail without understanding how bail works. She's calling out the knee-jerk lawmaking. McBath is doing the same thing from another angle. You can't pretend to champion victims and law enforcement while backing a bill that, in her telling, would pull essential resources out of communities. So what do we do with this? We do what the hearing itself demands. We insist on accountability that is specific, not performative. We ask for definitions that are legal, not rhetorical. We demand oversight that happens because it's required, not because someone got cornered by a calendar. And we remember what this clip is really about. Institutions are either built to serve the public, or they get repurposed to serve narratives. If lawmakers can't draft a criminal justice bill without risking collateral damage to their own states, that's not a joke. That's a governance failure. And the cost of that failure lands on victims, cops, courts, and ordinary people who just want a system that works. The most patriotic thing in moments like this is boring. Competence, honesty about what a bill does, and respect for constitutional limits. Because when politics turns into performance, the country still has to live with the policy.